Good morning. Good morning. It must be 9 o'clock on Monday morning. It is Make It Happen Monday show here, and your host, Cheryl Andrews, also known as the Listening Detective, where I ask questions so that other people can share their stories and their strategies to help you achieve success without stress. But ultimately, what I hope you will do is learn to listen to and trust yourself. So without any further ado, today we're talking about ditching body shaming and dieting. And I know that might be a little bit controversial, but for those of you who know me, know that my journey into personal development started back in 2006. I was been working in the slimming industry for 9 years, and I just had this sense that there was more to telling people what to eat and sitting around and being in peer support. Now, I totally agree that we need to have peer support and we need to have like-minded people there. But I was seeing so many people have adverse reactions to the numbers on the scales. I was having conversations behind the scenes about people who were struggling to put the changes in place because the family didn't like it. And then you add into that the society expectations. I just knew there was something that wasn't quite right. And that started my journey into personal development and coaching. And guess what? This week I met, I think we only met a couple of weeks ago, a lady called Mel Wakemen, who is a nutritional consultant, a food freedom fighter, and part of the non-diet movement, and also an intuitive eater consultant. And I am just so excited to bring her on because I feel like I've just met somebody who's made sense of my last 10 years of learning. So without any further ado, please give a warm welcome to Mel to this week's show. Good morning, Mel.
Good morning, Cheryl. I'm so excited to talk to you about this.
I'm glad to have you here. So without any further ado, tell us, what are you making happen in the world right now?
I am supporting people that want to find food and body peace and freedom. I'm very much standing up against diet culture or the diet industry, but that doesn't mean that I'm anti people who have ever dieted, because I am somebody who has dieted a lot in my past. I've had a very funky relationship with food, and it's something in me that I've found my passion now, where I have to kind of bring myself to help women discover who they really are without all of the sort of emotional, mental and physical health sacrifices that I think we've been told we need to make in order to find health and happiness.
There's so much going on in my head. For any of you that are watching live, please leave your comments below. If you've got experience with diets, you love them or hate them, body shaming, whatever your questions are, please leave them for Mel. Because anyone that knows as the Listening Detective, the job for me to do is keep my head absolutely empty and listen and ask questions. But I'm finding that my system is just so excited, and so I'm trying really hard to calm myself down to make sure I actually listen, because I can't even think of a question, which is why I'm waffling to try and get the question that I want to ask you. You've got the podcast called Cake Over Keto. I have watched absolutely listened to every single episode in the last 4 days. But there is one there that's really, being somebody that probably from the age of 9 years old my weight was talked about. And I was referred to the fat baby, and I'm also the big sister, the older sister. So the language around my identity and sense of self. And you ask a question on that podcast, when did you do your first diet and why? And I remember it so clearly. A magazine, it's summer 1982 across it. And it was this star thing. You got, I think it was 10 stars for a burger or something. So it was all done, not with calories, but you had stars so you could have 10 stars per day for this thing. But do you know what really shocked me when I thought about that? Is I didn't realize I was just 15.
Yeah.
And I suddenly realized that, and I remember the moment I was in a changing room and my mum said, I'd try my Tuesday press skirts. One was in a sort of a really itchy fabric. I don't know why I got that, because I hate itchy clothes, and a sort of a canvas material. One fitted as a 12 and one was too tight. And I said, Mum, I think I need a 14 in that. And my mum went, a 14? And I can still remember that. And I sort of kind of go, oh my God, the reason I did it is because a skirt was badly cut. That there was a skirt that didn't fit. And my mum was so stressed. She she'd obviously watched on TV that, you know, if you're overweight at 9, some programmer told her, then you'll be overweight for the rest of your life and you're going to have diabetes. So she, from a parent who really worried about me, she wanted the best for me. And I realized that's when my journey started. So tell me a little bit more about this process of letting go of the diet, because I've gone on a journey, and that one really, I've sat with it I've had to keep going and thinking, yeah, I did do a few years of letting go of it, but I still want it.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about that. And I've got some questions and stuff from G and Mandy, and maybe I'll come back to those to you in a moment. Thanks, Mandy and G. I'll come back to you shortly.
Oh, it's hard. It's really hard, Cheryl. You know, we live in this world that absolutely, you know, particularly for women, objectifies bodies. And there's a huge misunderstanding. And part of me thinks some of it's ignorance, some of it's through, I know there's all the issues around patriarchy and capitalism, and I don't do politics really, but in terms of the stuff that is sort of shoved in our faces around who we are supposed to be and what we are supposed to look like. So most of us will have had for our whole life had to internalize messages that we are supposed to be a certain shape or size. And this brings into sort of play all of the kind of diversity inclusion issues around health equalities and access to health and support and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, when I've gone through this processing myself, and when I think about my clients, and like with your situation, Cheryl, you know, many of my clients were probably put on a diet because it was a generational thing. That's what happened. It was, well, if you need to lose weight, you go to a slimming group. And the idea being that I suppose the message we hear today is we just eat a little bit less and you move a bit more, and hey presto, it happens. And it's that simple. Excuse me. And then we have to kind of, so there's no blame or shame here. And I think that's really important. And that's something that I emphasized in my podcast in terms of, it's what we knew at the time. It's what our parents knew, or our aunties, or our carers, or the people around. It's their belief system. So I'm not here to judge that at all. It's about understanding where that belief system comes from. But to move away, whatever age, and I think particularly when we get to kind of midlife, and there's a definite correlation between kind of menopausal women and getting to 40s and 50s and beyond, thinking, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
I can't subject my body and my mind to this continual kind of cycle of kind of restriction and repent, essentially, and kind of body bashing. But how the hell do I let go of the biggest safety rope that I've had probably for most of my life, where I feel I'm doing something, I'm in control of something? And my identity, as you said, Cheryl, my identity is part of everything that I tried and attempted and succeeded and failed at into becoming this person. And I think when we start to come to that realization that something has to give in a world that sees aging as a problem and menopause is a nightmare, and getting bigger means that you don't care about yourself, or you're just lazy or weak or guilty of eating too much and not doing the right things. When we have to come to that place where it's like, but I can't do that anymore, there is a real sense of grief. There's losing that safety of, but I'm in control of, if I put these rules in place and if I try and set my goals to achieve a certain weight loss, I'm trying something, I feel in control. But letting go of that feels so scary, because it's that, but if I allow myself to eat certain foods, or if I don't track where I am, how am I going to know where I am? And I'm going to, our sort of catastrophic thinking goes to, well, I'm never going to be able to stop eating. I'm going to become the size of a house. So those are kind of the classic kind of thoughts. And we have to also deal with the grief of leaving our body behind that we may have used to have had, or grieving even the idea of wanting to become something that we never can. And that's tough.
Yeah. And I really felt some emotion come up as you were talking about identity, because I think for me, there's a part of me, and I think, and I have to go back to that trusting yourself, because it's a process, isn't it? And I'd love to, I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot, but you talked on one of your podcasts about the 10 principles of intuitive eating. And I don't know whether that's a right thing. I didn't ask you to prepare for this, whether you can share them with us in a moment, what those principles are. But I know for me, that I do believe, if I really listen to myself, that I am a slimmer person. It's not that I'm there. So I've gone on a journey of 10 years of accepting who I am, loving the body that I have, stopping the body shaming, stopping the book I wrote was Manage Your Critic. I stopped criticizing myself for the body shape. I stopped calling food good or bad. I stopped saying I was having a treat or I was being naughty. I stopped, changed all my language associated. So I changed what I call my relationship with food. And where I've reached at the moment, as I've come to realize when I go back through all those photographs, I've heard the term, haven't you? I'd love to be as fat as I was when I was 16 and I thought I was fat. I think there's a part of me that genuinely believes right now that the weight has gone on almost in a protection mechanism. It's like, well, that's what you say I am, so that's what I'm going to be. And I truly believe that as the more I'm listening to myself, and it's that letting go, this is my year for letting go. And that's not just the weight, but it's letting go of the narrative or the story that I'm telling myself that doesn't serve me, whether that's in relation to food or how many hours I work or how much money I earn, whatever those stories are. And those who know I'm writing the book, Do Delegate or Ditch, I've got stuck right in the book and I'm on the ditch phase. I've realized I wasn't walking my talk because that letting go is not as easy as people. Some people just make a decision that I've got to let it go and they stop something, don't they? They have that ability just to do that. And for other people, it's a process of letting go of that, because it's like you say, it's the comfort zone, it's the familiar, it's what that part of the brain goes, well, this is what we've always done. And the big thing that seems to come from what you just said is that trusting yourself that you will know when to stop eating. So tell me a bit more about these principles of intuitive eating, because I'm sure Mandy's got here. She started dieting after being badly bullied at school, dieted all your adult life and mostly maintaining after 5-stone weight loss. I just know my own journey has involved healing the trauma of my past, and that words did wound me. Yeah. And that I didn't have massive traumas as other people might call them. And I know that there may be people who have, trauma from a different perspective. Sometimes it was that I was just shouted at. Sometimes it was just the words that we used, or, mum saying, you don't want to be overweight, but then telling me I have to finish my plate. My poor brain was going, but I'm full. And now I've got to finish it. I'm wasting money and I'm wasting food. And it's like, that can cause trauma, can't it? Just in a young person's brain, trying to make sense of. But you're saying to me, don't be overweight and look after yourself. But you're also telling me that I'm not allowed to leave the table until my plate's finished. Or, and I know that being a good girl conformist, that really did have I'll lovingly call it, for the sake of a brain fart. It was like my brain just didn't know how to make sense of it. And that did cause trauma, because I just wanted to be a good girl. I wanted to be doing the right thing, and nothing made sense.
And no wonder. How confusing is that? And as children, we don't have those skills. We don't have the emotional resilience. We don't have the language. We don't have the capacity. Why would we? To be able to kind of work through that and actually determine what is maybe our problem and what is somebody else's problem, And it's interesting you mentioned trauma, because I do trauma-informed work in this, because a lot of the time there are, childhood or early adult or adult experiences that interfere with our nervous system and our biological responses. And what we have to learn to do is to allow our body to find safety, and learn. That's where our trust comes in, so that we don't fight our body. We learn to work with it. And I think there's a huge misconception around what trauma is, that there's a very almost like a set definition that it has to be significant physical or emotional harm, and it's not. It is an accumulation of the everyday stuff, the messaging, the discrimination, the stigmatization that we experience as human beings, that we hold in our body. So intuitive. Sorry, you were going to say.
Well, and I think I just want to come back to what you said about there's no blame here. I think even those people, and I want to put it out there, that have set up industries about slimming, the Weight Watcher founders, the Slimming World founders, Margaret Miles Brownwell, who I worked with Slimming World, I know that in her heart of hearts, it's because it's what she needed and what worked for her. And she shared it. And I just think in this age of information, we're getting more and more of this stuff where other people are telling us what works for them. Here's even I've got a 7-step to clarity process, but that is a process that I'm hoping will teach people how to listen to and trust themselves. And I think there's so much help going out there at the moment where people are being told, this works or do this, that we're losing that ability to listen to our own system. And it wasn't until I was listening to the first episode or the first chapter of Intuitive Eating just this morning on my walk that I realized that in shutting off something in my system, because I obviously couldn't get the body right, I literally had lost the ability to know when I was full or when I was hungry. So I ate because other people are eating, because I wanted to join in. I wanted to be socially acceptable. I ate because I was emotionally distraught, and by eating, it stopped the churning in my tummy, or it caused a cloudy feeling, so I couldn't think. And these are things I've worked out over the last 10 years. But I've realized that, and it's in the Intuitive Eating book that just today I was listening to, is that I was like, but it stopped me from feeling all other kinds of feelings, those like love and joy. And ironically, it probably came about to stop myself from feeling pain and hurt of not being good enough, not being right. But until I learned how to listen to myself and actually feel emotion, I didn't really know how to feel when my body was telling me I was hungry or not. It's probably not appropriate, but hey, what the heck. But even like knowing when you need to go to the loo. I'm terrible. I was terrible, put that past tense, for just suddenly needing to go. And I realized that all of that is part of that thing where I'm so putting my attention outside on what other people need. I'm suddenly go, oh my gosh, I need the loo. And it's like, there was early warning signs that I was completely ignoring along with the hunger. So I'm just really fascinated, having listened to this stuff, that what I know I'm going to do from here is be really, really, again, listening to my system and actually feeling what the feelings I'm feeling, so that I've got a better way of tuning into it. So going back to let's tell us these 10 principles. I think we're supposed to be about a half an hour show, but I feel like I've got so many questions for you. Please, Mandy or G, if you've got any questions. We've got 4 people live today. If you've got any questions for Mel, please pop them down below. I know that she'd be happy to answer them, even if not live, after the show finishes. So tell us about these 10 principles, because I know they sound easy, but they make sense to my experience as well. So please tell us one at a time.
So these 10 principles of intuitive eating were kind of, the model was created by 2 dietitians in America called Evelyn Tribole and Elise Reich. And these 10 principles are based on the principle of what's called interoceptive awareness. Okay, so this is our ability to have an idea about what's going on within us, inside us. And it is absolutely, the classic example I always use is, when you get that sensation you need a wee or you need a poo. It's like it's there. It's like what to do. And yeah, whether or not we do at the time is a whole other kind of worms, isn't it? But
I'm not going to say my age or childbirth or menopause. I realise now it's because I'm not listening.
But that whole idea of listening to your body, and I see this a lot in terms of the language around health and wellness, and whether it's kind of listening to your body is very much in the non-diet movement, and it's hard. There's almost an expectation that we'll just listen to your body, as if it's like, oh yeah, damn, just switch it on, there we go. Everything is coming into me now. And wouldn't that be amazing if we just press the switch?
Well, I don't know. If you shut it down for a long time, I think, you know, maybe that's where my book come from. I didn't know it. It's the overwhelm. When you do start paying attention to stuff, you'll get like almost a sensory overwhelm, I imagine. So that's why I think for some people it has to be a process. It has to be a little bit at a time and practice that, like almost building a muscle up, isn't it? That you tune into each part of it.
I think that, I mean, intuitive eating is absolutely a process. It kind of never ends. You can't pass or fail it. It's not a tick box exercise. And I am, you know, however, well, my funky food journey started when I was 15. Okay. And I was probably a 14 to a 16. And then I received a comment, which was, "Here comes Thunder Thighs." That was the moment. That was the moment I was like, I don't like my body anymore. I don't like being in my body. I don't like being with my body. And then I started to, want to change it. And this disconnect that you're talking about is what makes it very difficult to be able to listen to our body, because initially we start thinking, well, I want to change my body. I don't like being in it. So, if I start to change it, then how am I going to do that? So we start to switch off from our own body wisdom, and we go externally. So we start listening to other people and following what other people do. And we may well follow eating plans and those sorts of things. And they tell us that often we'll start to receive compliments when that happens. We might well start to change, and that reinforces the idea that this is a good thing to do. So we get more disconnected. But we also live in a world that is full on, like that doesn't prioritize food. That really, I meet a lot of my clients who have no idea what food they like. They don't trust food. They haven't got time for it. It's almost an inconvenience to have to eat in the middle of the day because we should be doing stuff. There's that element of it. And there's also the element of, well, I don't like being in my body, so I'm just gonna leave it because I don't like the experience. So there's so many things that can actually, cause this disconnect to when we start to come back into our body, we don't know, what it even is we're supposed to be listening out for, what that means, and what we're supposed to do with those feelings. So the idea of intuitive eating is, I think a lot of people may refer to it as it's about eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're full. And that, to a certain extent, is in part true, but that's just a piece of the cake, as it were. With the 10 principles, they embed together, they integrate. So we can't just cherry pick and go, oh, well, I'm just going to learn to check in with my hunger and fullness cues. And that in itself gets very complex because we get worried about, well, what if I allow myself to eat? And what's that going to mean if I allow these foods coming in? But they have to be integrated into learning to sort of understand our dieting beliefs and mentality. And in a society that normalizes food restriction and kind of gives a morality to food and shames us for overeating or emotionally eating, it's very complex. But principle one is going through rejecting the diet mentality. I won't necessarily do these in order because for me, they do integrate all over the place, but it's also about being mindful. So again, intuitive eating isn't just eating mindfully. And that's being mindful about what we want to do is get into how food makes us feel. So we get to learn what foods feel good by experimenting and what foods sit nicely and give us energy, and allowing our body to tell us that rather than maybe those rules that said, well, that's bad and don't have too much of that.
That was the biggest light bulb moment for. I spent a year because the program that I run is about actually looking at how you make decisions. And so, of course, it's also checking, what have you heard outside? What's your own system telling you? And just comparing and contrasting and working out how you're filtering the feedback you're getting versus, and also the feedback you're giving yourself. It's just checking where that rule or that belief has come from and whether that is true for you or whether that's something you've acquired or adopted along the way. So one of the things I did as part of my own journey was actually spending a year only eating food that gave me clarity, using that as my guiding light. And I was so surprised to discover, like if I ate chocolate or sugary stuff, of course I had a cloudy head. I felt quite sort of brain foggy. And I was like, oh, so when I don't want to think or feel things, I can eat chocolate. So I do sometimes now go consciously, I don't want to think or feel anything today. This is pants. So I know if I eat the chocolate, that's how it will go on.
That's coming from a place of respecting your body's needs.
Yeah. And emotionally and physically. I think that's the big thing. But the irony of it is, since doing that work, and the more I've got to know my emotions, I've also found other ways to, it's because I wasn't used to feeling emotion. So I've actually learned how to name an emotion, express it, find different ways to, so even going for walking or journaling, finding other ways to honor it. So actually, and finding other ways to switch it off as well. I don't have to think 24 hours a day. People often get busy doing stuff or eating or whatever the thing is that they're doing, I've discovered, because it's a distraction technique. So actually eating was a way of distracting myself from thinking or feeling stuff. And I thought, well, actually, there's other ways. So I think it is that change of focus, isn't it? And actually, the big thing was for me to go, okay, it might taste nice now, but remembering how I felt I think that's what I just read in the book, wasn't it? It's like how I felt later after I've eaten it. Because obviously the memory recall might be for, oh, it tastes great. But actually, it's about how I'm going to feel later on, and remembering how bloated I felt and how uncomfortable I felt, and reminding myself to focus on feelings was a big thing that helped change what I ate and when I ate it. It has been massive. I'm really aware of time, and we're just wing it as long as you're okay with time. Mandy's saying, my experience is other things give fake hunger cues through beliefs. Yeah. Like when we're tired or emotional or not actually hungry. Yeah, I totally get it. I remember standing in front of my Slimming World clients and actually saying, I wish I had some lights that could tell me whether I was really thirsty, tired or whatever, because I'm sure I eat a lot of the sugary foods. But so even at that point, when I was there as a consultant, I was sort of saying, I just know that I'm not reading the cues properly. And so I would experiment with drinking more water or just going to bed or laying down or sleeping for a little while just to see whether or not I could get the same response I was getting.
But those are the rules that we're kind of brought up with, though. If you're not sure you're hungry, then best not have something to eat. Have a drink instead, because hey, if that's what it is, then you haven't eaten and you haven't done anything terrible. I'm in the position of, well, if you don't know you're hungry, how are you going to find out? So you could have something to eat and see what happens. So there's one of the principles of intuitive eating is gentle nutrition. So that's bringing in what's called body food congruence. And so it's acknowledging that we eat for nutrition and health, but also for joy and pleasure and taste. And yes, we do seek food for comfort. That's like, it's human. We've learned to do that, which is kind of incredible, because like it shows we had a need that needs meeting. So we can't one of the other principles is coping with emotions with kindness, because we live in a society that basically shames some of our emotions. So anger and sadness and any idea that we're not coping in life. But we have to learn to sit in the shit, and we have to sit with those difficult emotions and realize that we're okay, because these difficult emotions are just clues. And sure, if we're emotionally eating all the time and that's our main crutch, then that may well not be healthy for an individual. So we don't have to rip the plaster off and not do that. Let's layer our support mechanisms and find other ways to cope with difficulty, because boy, do we need that. So there's lots of things around, and there's the body respect and body image stuff, thinking about joyful movements. It's very intuitive, rather than using the idea that exercise is to undo what we've eaten or to punish our body. Dealing with food police, it's the whole kind of thing. And I think for me, it's fundamentally changed what I did with my relationship with food, alongside other work as well.
Well, I think that's the impact, isn't it, as well, that when you change your relationship with food, you change the relationship you have with yourself, because you start listening to yourself better. And that changes your relationship with other people, and it changes the impact that has. I just remember that thing you were saying about, eating food for joy. Again, in fact, on the Do Like Academy tomorrow night, we'll be doing a 5 senses thing. And I remember, recall the taste of something. Well, the only thing I could recall the taste of, and I still can't taste it while I'm recalling it, is lemon. And I suddenly realized I had no memory recall for taste. It's almost like there was no time to savor or enjoy the food. It was just like I was often thinking about something else. And I'm like, oh, my food's gone. And it was that whole enjoying food, caught between I want to have it and I'm not going to be told what to do, and I shouldn't be having it, so I couldn't do. So there was always so much head stuff going on, whilst or trying not to have the head stuff going on, that I was, that it just took away a lot of the pleasure.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling quite angry. I'm probably talking 8-9 years ago now, but quite angry when people go, oh, I can eat anything and it doesn't matter. I just felt so frustrated. But I just want to say to people that it's true. It absolutely is true that you can eat anything, and you still need to listen to what your body needs rather than just doing it to piss everybody else off. So you can go rebellious, can't you? And just go, I'm going to eat what I like, I'm going to look however I like. But if that's not really what you want, you're just doing it because you're fed up of other people telling you what you can and can't do and shouldn't do. You're kind of still not listening to yourself, really. You're just doing the opposite just to be rebellious or feel like you've got some control or whatever else is going on.
Sometimes it's working through that. This is a journey of self-discovery. It's really about a knowing who you are and kind of why you're here. But learning to take care of your body, particularly if you don't feel that great about it, and like you said earlier, in terms of, how do we know what foods taste like if we're used to kind of either kind of hoovering them down or not trusting ourselves with food and just using it to push everything away and numb ourselves out? It's really, it can be so overwhelming to think, I don't know what it is I like or what I want, and how do I let go of that idea of, you mean I can eat stuff because it tastes, it tastes good, and moving into that place.
And I have noticed, though, as I enjoyed a rhubarb crumble at the weekend, because I am more aware of it, the crumble I made was really pants. It wasn't very nice. I put too much flour in it or something. So before, admittedly, I still probably got an old language. It's like, if I'm not really enjoying it, it's not worth the calories. It's kind of an old, but it's still that, at least now, I'm consciously aware of whether I'm enjoying it or not. And actually, it's okay not to eat it if I'm not really enjoying it.
Absolutely.
And yes, that was a sort of process of letting go of this calorie stuff. It's sort of, I never counted calories, by the way, until about 6 months ago, because I just became curious I'm just curious how much is in this stuff, just to get some insights. And I think it's really interesting. I think you and I could talk for 2 or 3 days about stuff. I know there's some things you said in the podcast, and I've also picked up on it, and I've seen it with my own clients about how our system processes and makes sense of numbers.
Yeah.
So whether it's the scales, or sometimes in my clients, it might be number of clients they've got, or how much money is in their bank account, or how many friends they have, or the minute you put a number on something, whether it's the scale or the calorie or the stars in my first diet, or whether it's SINs when it was with, Slim and Wild, whatever it is, once you number something, I think that some people, the logical brain takes over and analyzes it very objectively, and we've stopped listening to the, how did it feel? What was the impact? And so we only get the sort of the what you can see, and we lose connection with that bit where it says, and what's the impact? How did it make you feel? What was the emotional impact of this decision? Yeah. I just think you and I've got to have loads more conversations. But one of the things I did want to ask you is, I've been following this series with the word push. So I think that in my experience, when people are motivated to take action, so they're going to be motivated to change their behavior, to want to change their relationship with food. People talk about pushing yourself to do things and pushing yourself outside of comfort zone, because it's going to be uncomfortable, letting go, surrendering, giving up old beliefs, that stopping the language that you've had, all of that can be uncomfortable. And there's a push that when I model and ask people about that push for you is like when it works, and there's a push that doesn't work. And so can you relate to that in terms of this change in mindset and attitude and this relationship with food? You know, what kind of push is that push when it works?
When the push works, you start to feel more connected. And from that place of building trust and confidence, there's a knowing. But if you push too hard, then your nervous system takes over. And so this is where
push that works, and we'll go into that nervous system push in a minute, and I could just ask you a couple of questions about it. So when you've got that push and there's a connection and there's a knowing, what kind of push is that push when there's a connection and a knowing?
It is uncomfortable. I would be lying to say that, like, in terms of changing your relationship with food in your body, you need to be ready. You need to be ready in terms of be willing, kind of have this readiness feeling about you, but also maybe being petrified and insecure and uncertain and not knowing. And so there's something in you, there's something intuitive in you that goes, I have to do this.
Oh,
and so it's kind of,
can I just check, when it's in you and it's intuitive and it's a I have to do it, whereabouts in you is that I have to do it?
It's probably quite visceral. Like, I do a lot around body sensations and what they're feeling and where they are, and there's probably something kind of visceral in your, what's that, I've just got a mental block now, under here, what's that called, your solar plexus kind of thing. It's like there's something in me that is fighting to come out, and I'm scared, and there's something in my head that says, I think if anything, it's knowing what you don't want anymore, as well as having wanting something that's different. So I talk a lot about visualizing what you want your life to look like, and I'm sure you probably know similarly do, in terms of I work with people with eating disorders, active eating disorders, and disordered eating, and it's sometimes not having an idea, can't imagine what life could be like without this persona that's dominated your body. So this is where getting help comes in, because I think it's very, very hard to do this work on your own, particularly if it's, it's very deeply ingrained. And not being afraid. I know you've talked about asking for help before, Cheryl, and acknowledging that it's okay not to do that on your own, and maybe get some help and guidance.
I think people just haven't been taught, have we, though, either from school or at young age, that we've very much been raised to be a very independent nation. And I'm sure there's a book I'm going to write one day, Independence is Overrated. But there's the physical, from a listening point of view, that there is something that you could write it down, you could record it, you could listen it back to it, but your brain doesn't hear your own voice the same way other people do. And so when somebody else repeats your words or is just holding that space for you, you talked before, it can literally be the thing that your nervous system needs in order to settle enough, in order to listen to yourself, in order to hear. You need to have that support. And it might be a wounded child. It might be some words that have wounded you from a very young age, that just having another person present while you take the time to access your inner wisdom is actually imperative, just to get your nervous system to relax enough to know that you're safe enough to do this inquiry, to be curious about it. And I think, and there's a whole load of things in between sort of one-to-one therapy and grouped work, is that when you get that, there is something when you've got a group mentality and a group think, and you don't feel like you're on your own, and that other people can hear what you've got to say and they're honoring it, and they're not judging it or correcting it or trying to make it different. It can instantly update your system to go, actually, it's okay to be me. It's okay to have these thoughts. It's okay to have these feelings. So I feel like I might even say to you, I'm going to interview you to perhaps get that push, because you've got this knowing that's inside, there's a connection, there's a visceral feeling, and there's something in the head as well. But there's I have to do it. And it's usually something you want to get away from, but often there's also some fear about, because you don't know what this thing is that so there's this thing you're going to do, and you don't really, you might try and visualize it, but you don't really know what it's like or how you're going to get there, or that sort of stuff. That's what I'm hearing.
The thing that is kind of the trigger for that may well be kind of just feeling that food in your body is taking over your life. It's like it's an all-consuming experience of kind of waking up in the morning. Do you step on the scales or not? What am I going to eat today? So many food thoughts that is emotionally exhausting. There's something there that will be, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah,
there has to be more to life than this.
So
and
that
fear about health. Yeah.
So I have to do it, and it's all consuming. And the push that doesn't work, that's like what?
That's like peeping through the door, the crack in the door, and just basically go, excuse me, I'm just going, shit, no, I'm not doing that. and that really is, it is a nervous system thing, in terms of we have to find safety in order for us to start to go deeper and do that inner work, and to do the self-exploration, and to be curious and let go of the judgment, and to be compassionate. And as soon as we've, and I very much talk about like literally baby steps. We have to take baby steps. There's no rule about how big these steps are or how many you have to do. And ultimately staying still is still progress. And recognizing that this journey is not linear, but when we start to push too far, we often find we go back to our old habits. Absolutely. Those old beliefs come in, the inner critic comes in, because that inner critic is like, no, don't do that. Don't leave me behind, or you don't know what's down there. So let's just stay here. So it's starting to very much find safety, layer that support system and connections in place, so that we can go, okay, I don't like this. This doesn't feel comfortable, but can I sit with this for a few minutes? Can I be with this? It might be 10 seconds, Cheryl. It might be 15 seconds. And like, okay, I'm okay.
I remember interviewing somebody years ago who was actually coaching. Actually, there's not an interview. He was working on a book, and it just, one thing he said, when somebody just says one thing and it kind of lands, he just said, the thing with all emotions is they're temporary and transient. It will come and it will go. Your love doesn't stay there permanently. It's a burst of like energy, and you go, oh, and then it goes again. The same with anger and all the other. And it was that moment when I realized this is going to pass on its own without me having to do anything. I can just be with it.
Yeah.
And what's really lovely about interviewing people about their push models is, what I'm hearing for you is it's almost been the opposite to some of the ones I've heard, is actually when the push for you, when it's the right push, is it's a real strong knowing, and the thing that you didn't want is all consuming. You just know you have to, and it's inside you. But actually the push that doesn't work for you is the one where you sort of step forward and go, no. So there's almost like in your body language, is sort of almost a pulling back, which is really interesting, just comparing. And I think this is why it's a great example of how every word we all use, if we take on what other people say, we never really know what they mean by what they say. Because my experience of pushing when it's been right, personally, has been it feels more like a pull. I have this deep knowing, and it's like I'm being pulled towards it. And having had these conversations with you, I just know that my journey back to my body is where my business needs to go. I know that something's going to change phenomenally as a result of our conversation. So I feel really honored that I've met you, and thank you so much. But I find the pushing that doesn't work for me is when I keep pushing myself to do something, and I keep myself busy. So I'll go and open loads of other doors. I'll go through that door and help there. And I'll go over that door and I'll help there. And I'm basically doing anything other than sitting with the discomfort of just being where I am right now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I agree with that completely. It's when our nervous system gets activated, the whole flight and fight response. And it's like, well, I can't think about that. Let's do something else. And I can't sit with this. So I'm gonna do, not be. And we get rewards because, hey, stuff happens when we're active. And I have a huge challenge around getting myself to slow down in life, because I'm perpetually kind of Yeah, I'm a good distractor. I'm a good distractor for myself. But also we can also go into collapse state and shut down. So it's I do a lot of sort of nervous system work so that we get to become regular. So we learn how to self-regulate. We learn to check in with our body so we know when we can push, and when perhaps it's time not to push, because our nervous system is there to protect us. So it's learning what a dysregulated nervous system looks and feels.
And I had this conversation with my fitness instructor, and we were just literally on a progress call at the end of last month. And it's that, you know, the pain that you need to listen to and stop versus the pain that you need to work through. That, you know, your body will ache when you exercise, and it's learning to know which pain you're supposed to stop, emotional, physical, mental. But it only comes, doesn't it, when you've got that ability to stop and listen. So Mandy just asked, I'm just going to pop this on the bottom of the thing. This is Mel Wakemen's LinkedIn profile. In the show notes today above on LinkedIn and both on Facebook, you will also see the podcast link to Cake Over Keto. Please do check out Mel's podcast. And on her podcast, she's very good at letting you know how to get in touch with her, how to follow her, how to connect with her. So please do that. Mel, it's been an absolute joy having you on the show today. I know that from the engagements we've got and the conversations going, that I'm sure that this conversation is going to carry on for some time to go. Thank you, ladies. Thought provoking. I have an appointment at 10 a.m, so I need to jump off. Hope to connect soon, Mel. So she has asked you for your details, and hopefully you guys will connect.
Yeah.
So without any further ado, we're going to wrap the show up with our normal end of the show where we set people up for success. So I'll speak to you shortly, Mel. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Thanks for being with us. I wasn't thinking before I spoke just then. So it is Make It Happen Monday, and this is your time now to take a moment to listen to yourself. You've been very kind. You've been listening to both Mel and I, but I want you to think about, what do you know now as a result of what you've heard? What difference does knowing that make? And just check in with your own system. As we were talking, what was it doing, saying, being? Will you notice any responses? I definitely felt an emotional response to the food being joy. And I was like, yeah, that's where it is now. And I'm so grateful that that relationship with food has changed so dramatically. But I'm also noticing some other parts of my system that's like, oh, you still want to talk about calories? So just think about yourself. What do you know now about body shaming and dieting and ditching all of that? And given what you know now, just using the clean setup questions, what would you like to have happen? Think it, write it down, and just notice, are you talking about what you want? Or are you talking about what you don't want? If you train your attention on outcome focus, your own system can start helping you to notice when it's working, notice when there's resources available to support and resource you. When you talk about what you don't want, it can be much harder for your own system and people around you to support you. It's like going shopping and telling the shopkeeper, you don't want any eggs, you don't want any bread, you don't want any cheese. And they look down the shopping aisle and go, well, there's all of this stuff I could offer you. So learning to pay attention to what you do want can help you to support and resource yourself. You might, if you've got down what you don't want or want less of, just check in with yourself. When you don't have that, then what happens? And just notice whether or not you can get that to outcome focused. Now think about, for you to have that, how do you need to be? What kind of you is that you? And for you to be like that and to get that outcome, what kind of resource and support might you need? Take a moment to think about that right now. Maybe it will be as simple as sitting with and just noticing how you feel, noticing your thoughts, noticing your sensations. In this case with food, noticing whether you're hungry or you're not hungry. It might be a pen and paper that you require. Maybe it'll be words of encouragement from somebody close to you. Now, with a bit of warning here, if you ask someone to give you some words of encouragement, I'm sure Mel will remember this. I've had so many women over the years that says to their partner, please tell me off if I'm eating chocolate. That doesn't go well. So be careful when you ask people to do things. Remember, it's an experiment. Have some fun with it. They might then try those words on for size and find out whether they work for you or not. Some days they will, sometimes they won't. Be playful. And as always, if you're feeling like you haven't got the right resource and support, you now know about Mel Wakemen. If you know that you want to change your relationship with food, then please get in touch with her. If you want to change your relationship with how you manage your time and how you ask for help, and you want to learn to switch off parts when it's really useful for you, then obviously get in touch with me, Cheryl Andrews, the Listening Detective. Have a fantastic week, and I'll see you again at 9 a.m. next week.